Dhabi, Excellency Ali Moemi, Excellencies, thank you for coming this morning to the gathering for the Holocaust Memorial Day. For us, Israelis, it's something that we are carrying all our lives since being little children, and each and every year we are starting to do our best to remember what happened and to make sure that it will not happen again.
Never.
We are here at the UAE, which is not, it's not for the first time. For the first time when I was here for the International Memorial Day for the Holocaust was in beginning of 2022, when I was in an event that was held here in Abu Dhabi with Your Excellency Liora Birnhack, and it was, for me it was shocking. Now it's not the first time, but still we are not taking it for granted. For us Israelis, being here in the United Arab Emirates, under the leadership of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, that is paving the way to tolerance and to, this country, I think that is the country that most open country in the world. Everyone is talking, here you are doing it. And we are appreciating very much. We have with us my colleagues, ambassadors, and we invited Liora Birnhack to tell her story, maybe her mother's story through her eyes. I know Liora for the last, I think, 30 years, since she was 4 years old.
Yeah.
And we've asked Liora to come and tell the story of her family, which is fascinating. So on behalf of my spouse, Frat, and I, and our embassy, we are very happy to have you here. And we'll let Liora tell her story and we'll start the discussion. And Liora, please.
Okay, so first, Excellency Liora Birnhack and Excellency Ali Rashid. If you ask His Excellency Amir Hayek, from this second I'm going to call him Amir, because you have to know that in Israel, after you know somebody for 2 seconds, you call him by his first name. And I know all your countries, you know somebody each other for 40 years, and you still call Mr. And the Austrian, they have a lot of words to say before the name. And I was born in Israel. Yesterday was my birthday, 17th of April. And I was 67, and still I was in Israel. I was born in Israel, and I have a brother that is 7 years older than me, but he didn't want to hear about the Holocaust so much. And me, from the age of 3, and some people talk to me, I talk a lot, but I ask a lot of questions too. And my father, which I hold his name, Birnhack, my whole name is Liora Birnhack Markus, my children are Markus. I hold his name, maybe for a feminine thing too, to hold my father's name, but he is the only Birnhack who stayed alive. His parents, his uncles, his cousins, everybody was killed in the Holocaust. So I said, if he is the only Birnhack left, as long as I live, I want to hold his name. Although my children are Markus, but still I want to hold his name, because only my brother and me and my father are Birnhack in Haifa, from Haifa, in Israel. And my father, my grandmother, my grandfather, they never talked. They didn't want to talk about the Holocaust. I was thinking yesterday, why? And have my theories, but they're mine. It's ridiculous, but it's like they didn't want to remember, which is normal. And secondly, and this is the craziest things, they were ashamed. Because I'm from a family of fighters, I just told the Austrian ambassador that my grandfather was an officer in the Austro-Hungarian army when Krakow, where Krakow still belonged to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and he was an officer on a horse, and he even got, the Austrian, they give a cross when you're very brave, and he got the highest cross from the son of the empire at the time. So first he was a fighter, my grandfather, and then he was a businessman in Krakow. And in one day, he was a slave. So I don't think he wanted to be reminded of that. And my father, as he stayed all alone, it was very hard for him to speak. And I tell you something about my father. He was born in 1917, on the 17th of February. And 17, you saw yesterday was 17th of April, I was born 17th of April, my brother was born on 17th of November, so 17 is a very important number for us. And our Israeli guests, they know that 17, Schweißler Zetov. 17 means good. You know, we have the letters and we make, we have the numbers and we make the letters, and 17 means good. So maybe therefore we were lucky. I don't know. And in 1918, his biological father died from the Spanish flu. And 101 years later, we had COVID-19. And I always told my father, what do you mean 30 million died from a flu? Look, now all the medicine is so advanced. How could people die from a flu? And you see, this happened again. So if something like this can happen again, and we're not prepared, so I'm sorry, the Holocaust can happen again if we don't talk to it about it, and if we don't explain people. And the only thing that my father did speak was me. And sorry, I'm looking at Noora. I feel connected because her name is Noora, my name is Liora, and both of the names mean light, right? Yes. So, Liora, sorry if I say some things in other languages. I speak 4 languages fluently, and sometimes if I miss a word in English or I need help for a word, I will ask it in the other language that I don't know. Okay, so this picture you see, this is my mother and this is her sister. And this was before the war. So you can see the pictures. They were established people. They were not religious Jews. They were Jews, but they were not very religious. It was called at the time modern Jews. And they lived in Krakow, just near the main square of Krakow. If somebody was in Krakow, Gołąbia, ulica Gołąbia. So it's the street where they lived. My father didn't want to go back to Poland. He was angry at Polish people. He said, I was a Polish person. My father, my grandfather, for generations, we lived in Poland. So he didn't want to go to Poland again. And he always had excuses. So one of his excuses was that he is a Kohen. A Kohen is like the high priest that was in the temple 2,000 years ago, and I'm a daughter of a Kohen. So I don't have to do Pidyon Haben, which means that you buy your son back from the great priest. Is that right? Did I say it right, אמיר? פדיון הבן?
You can ask Rabbi Duchman.
אמרתי נכון? פדיון זה
It's the right-
כאילו
it's
אתה
the right
משלם
guy
על
to
הילד,
ask.
נכון?
Yes.
כן? So I said it right, yes. So it's only, this is the only privilege of mine to be a daughter of a Kohen. But my brother, of course, is a Kohen. And the Kohanim are not allowed to go to cemeteries, because cemeteries are not clean. And you see, all the time when he's doing like this, I know I'm saying things right. And my father said, for me, Poland is a big cemetery. So as a Kohen, I cannot go to Poland. So, but I think it was an excuse. You didn't want to go there. My father lived till 2 months before he was 97. And a year after he died, my mother told me, Liora, we're going to Poland. And so we did. And my children, of course, they were in Poland because in Israel you have like something in school. I think when they're in about 16, 17, then they have a trip to Poland to see the heritage. So they went. My father was okay with that. He said, yes, they have to see. But I told him, I'll never go without you. If I'll go, I want to go with you. So after he died, my mother suddenly got courageous. And she said, we're going to Poland. And you'll see it later. We were together after she wasn't 70 years in Krakow. And for me, it was very, very emotional. And I'm emotional today too, and I hope you understand that. And if you ask His Excellency Amir Chaim, he will tell you that I'm a very, very tough lady, right? I was fighting, he's look at him, he's smiling.
She was fighting against the government about regulations, because and she unfortunately she won. This is why we gain weight. And she had, she's producing vessels and we all ate it.
It's in English it's called like wafer cookies.
Yeah.
In Arabic it's wafla or wafla.
Yeah.
Okay. Arabic people like to eat wafers, wafla. Not baklawa, wafla. Wafla is like you have sheet, and you eat the wafers. It's called wafla in Arabic. Believe me.
But don't talk about food. We are in Ramadan
Unless
now.
there are wafers going down just now. No, I wasn't allowed, and I'm so stupid that I didn't bring it with me for the evening. I forgot because I didn't come for business. I just came for this, Because normally a businessman, he comes with his stuff. He says, maybe I'll meet somebody who will help me. But I was not concentrated in this. I was concentrated to tell you about my family. So anyway, this is my mother, and this is her sister. And in Israel, she's called Rina. But in Polish, she's called Rena or Renia. Because the Polish, they like in every word to make it like sweeter and nicer. And yes, yes.
Should be Halinka then.
Moja ciotka jest Halinka.
Your Polish is just out of this world. Congratulations. Amazing stuff. Congratulations.
So I just want to say that when my grandparents, after the war, came to Israel, I'm mixing things, but that's okay. That's the purpose of this. They were almost 50 years old, and they didn't know Hebrew, so nobody wanted to employ them. What can you do with a 50-year-old guy who doesn't know the language? And before they came to Israel after the Holocaust, they were like 2 years in Belgium, and Belgium is known to make wafers. So my grandmother brought like a little toaster, I can't explain it. And she started to do wafers by herself. And my grandfather, who was in Poland, a merchandiser, and he had, I don't know how to say it, he was the representative of Sushalt, which we, again food, excuse me, Your Excellency Ali, but it's a chocolate Sushot was a very long chocolate factory. And
Liora,
until
Liora,
today-
have to try it.
Liora, stop here and you will have to come again with a lot of chocolate after Ramadan.
I promise, and I want to tell you it's my first time in Abu Dhabi and in the Emirates at all. And I arrived yesterday evening, and when it seems that I cry, so maybe I cry a little bit, but I'm a little bit allergic to the weather. So, but it's a pro today to have tears. So anyway, after the war, they started the factory, which is now 73 years old. I'm the third generation, I'm the general manager, but I can sit here very calm because my son, who is the fourth generation of the family, is running the business now. So I can travel, but still, you know, when you have a factory, the troubles travel with you. You know, you never can be disconnected. Okay, so we spoke about my father, and the only thing that he did told me about the Holocaust, because we were buying machinery from Germany, and we were going to all kind of exhibitions in Germany. I said, you don't go to Poland, you go to Germany? He said, yes, the Germans were the enemy. The Polish were my family, but the Germans were the enemy. And then he told me one thing. If you want to be better than your enemy, you don't hate. And I don't allow you to hate Germans, because a German saved us, and not only a German. Before that, an Austrian saved them, some Polish people. He said, you're not allowed. I don't allow you to hate Germans. You can hate Nazis, yes, you can hate Nazis. But you cannot hate all Germans, because then you're not better than them. They hated us just because we were Jews. So you want to be like them, to hate Germans? Not in my house, no. And believe, that's a person who lost all his family. And he told me, you'll never hate somebody because of his religion. No Christian, no Muslims. You never hate somebody because of his nationality. No, you must be better than they were. And that's me. I connect to people, and I don't care their nationality or their belief, okay? And the same in Israel. Because in Israel, קוראים לי אשכנזייה. I won't say it. Even in Israel, we have like, you know, from Jews who came from Arab countries and Jews who came from European countries. And as you see, I look like I came from a European country. So we have even in ourselves some, you know, some things. And my grandmother, so when you see this was before. They lived in a very big flat. And when the war started, the first thing that was done, they put German officers in their flat. They put a whole family, which is my grandparents and their two daughters, Halinka. They were at that time called Wohlfeiler. And after that, my mother was Liora Birnhack and Halina Davidovich. And Halina we called Halina, and my mother we called Drenia. And so the first step of the war was that they put German officers in their flats, and they had to be their servants in their own flats. And my mother, she was 12 when it started, and it was winter, and she had to shovel snow outside the house and to bring the coal from the cellar to heat the house, something that before the maid was doing. And she said, I didn't mind to work. But you know, at the beginning, they didn't have the yellow thing, they had a yellow stripe. It started with a yellow stripe. So she said, our Polish neighbors, there were different ones. There were some who brought us some hot tea and cookies because we were working so hard. But there were other ones who spit on us and said Jew. And my mother, she went to a Polish school where there were maybe 1,000 girls, and in her class there were only 3 Jews. And she felt Polish because she learned in a Polish school, she spoke Polish. As you see, she looked Polish, and she wasn't used, people, her neighbors were spitting on her and saying, "You're a Jew." But my mother till today, she's 96, she's okay. And if she would travel, she'd be here today. So my emotion is, because it's my first time in the life that I'm telling the story. Because till today, it was only my mother. She spoke in the universities, she spoke in school, she was interviewed all over the world. They made even movies. And I was just sitting there listening to her. But 4 months ago, a French journalist came from the Le Parisien magazine. I hope I said it right. And she interviewed my mother for 4 hours. My mother doesn't know English. She speaks Hebrew, Polish, and German. And the journalist spoke French and English. So English I know. So I was translating. And this 96-old lady spoke for 4 hours. And I said, "Mother, get a rest." And she said, no, the French have to know, And she spoke. But after the journalist went away, she said to me, "Liora, that's it. That was my last interview. I'm tired." And from today, she said, "It's my last will. You are going to talk in my name." Because I talk a lot from the time I'm a girl. And she says, "Liora, you have a voice, people will listen to you, and I'm finished, I'm not talking again." Because when she talks about it, she didn't have it for years, all the bad dreams come back, okay? So after the flat, they went to the ghetto. And you see this little dog here in the picture? And the Jews were allowed only to take a small suitcase with them to the ghetto. And my mother came to my grandmother and said, "I don't need a suitcase. I need," and you know what it means, "I need Kropelka, my dog." And my grandmother was very smart. She said, "My daughter lost everything. She loves the dog." And just told her, "Take the dog." So they came to the ghetto, and in the ghetto, they put like 4 or 5 families in one flat. And all the other Jews said, "Are you crazy? We don't have food and you bring a dog? Throw the dog away." But if you knew my grandmother, people say I'm a little like her, but she was much stronger and she was much taller than me. She was a very tall woman. And she said, "If you touch the dog or my daughter, you have business with me." And everybody was afraid of my grandmother, so nobody said anything. But my mother couldn't go out because the streets of the ghetto, there were dead people on the street and so on. So how could she go with the dog? So the dog would go alone. But in the ghetto, my grandmother made an initiative, and she opened, and I don't know how to say it in English, because in English you say bakery, and it's not the right word, it's Konditorei. Wie sagt man das auf Englisch eigentlich?
Good question.
Good question, I don't know. But it's not a bakery. They make cakes. In the Konditorei they make cakes, right? So they were making cakes, not bread. How do they make cakes? My mother was very small and very thin, and they had still a little bit of money. So she would go onto the walls of the ghetto, take off her yellow ribbon. She looked Polish, blue eyes, blonde hair, and she was walking to bakeries in Krakow, waiting for the last hours where they don't sell the things anymore because they're not fresh. So she got it for very little money. And my grandmother was very talented to make cakes. So she took the old cakes, she grained them and so ever, and she made cakes. And that's how they had a little money. Most people who bought from there were the Germans because they had money, and some Jews still had some money or make some exchanges. So that's the beginning of the factory, and it's a very known, everyone who was in the Krakow ghetto knows this Konditorei, in Hebrew you say Konditoria, Ganken, right? It's not a bakery, but American and English people don't eat so much cakes, I think, so they don't have the name for it. But in Austria and Poland, people eat cakes. And so my mother was going down under the wall and coming back under the wall and bringing all the stuff. And as I told you, my grandmother was very smart. The bakery was just near the gate. And she always had a bottle of vodka. And when people wanted to leave the ghetto or do something, she would go to the officers and tell them, oh, it's so cold, come inside. I'll give you a cake and some vodka. And when the officers went into their bakery, some people or brought food in or did something. And and then this Kropelka got pregnant and had 2 puppies. One was white and one was black. And then all the Jewish families say to my grandmother, are you crazy? First you had 1 dog and now she has puppies. And she said, you don't touch her, you hear? But it didn't take a long time, like months later, they were called to leave again the ghetto and go to Plaszow. At that time, Plaszow was not yet a concentration camp. It was a working camp. And the officer was Amon Goeth. Whoever saw the movie of the Schindler List knows Amon Goeth. And again, my mother comes to my grandmother and says, I'm taking the puppies. And my grandmother said, no, now you're crazy. And she said, I don't care, I'm taking the puppies. And then, as she was only 13, she tells me, and I tell it like her because she's 96, but when she talks about it, she speaks like a little girl. She said, I told Kropelka, you're old and you'll be all right, but I'm going to save your children. And they were walking from Krakow to Plaszow by foot. And she put one puppy here and the other puppy here, and she put a shawl. And the Jews were waiting, and can I stand up for, is it okay if you don't care? So Amon Goeth was about 2 meters high, a big man, and he was standing at the entrance to Plaszow and making like that. And this side was to the dead, and this side was for life, for working. And my grandmother was very big and tall, was standing behind her daughter, and she said, oh my God, she's too young, she's going to the dead. And my mother was standing like that, and Amon Goeth looked at her. And I'm sorry to tell it, but when a German person sees a blonde girl with blue eyes, he treats her maybe a little bit different. And he said, little girl, what do you have in your coat? And she took out the puppies and she said, I heard you love dogs. It's a present from you. And he did love dogs, but he had these huge Dobermans who were jumping on Jews and killing them. But still, he loved dogs more than Jews, so he took the puppies. And the time he talked to my mother, some Jews went to the living line, and he said, wait a second. And he called his attendant officer, you know, he had like this, and he said, take those puppies to my house, to my wife. And he looked to my mother and said, okay, you go to the side of life. So my mother always tells everybody that puppies saved her life. And therefore, if you see a picture of her when she's old, we always have dogs at home because they saved my mother. And in Plaszow, can we go, I don't know. Oh, these are my uncles, the half brothers of my grandmother, just that you see how they lived before the war. And even the Israelis don't know it. This is my mother's uncle, half uncle. He was called Kuba, Yaakov, and he had a different family name than my grandmother. He was called Kuba Lieberman. And I don't know even if the Polish ambassador knows it. There was a very known football, not soccer for the American, no soccer, football. Europeans play football. There was a very known football Well, it's crazy, we're talking about the Holocaust, and we're laughing, but it's the same with my mother, so feel just fine. There was do you know this, Amir? There was Maccabi Krakow in Poland. It was a very known, and it was called Maccabi Krakow, or the Jews football team. And he was known. And this uncle, he was a football player, and it's still today. So a lot of young women liked him because he was a very good football man. And there was a Polish Christian girl who fell in love with him. And she took him outside of Krakow, him and 11 other family members, some of them brothers of my grandfather, some of them brothers of my grandmother, and she hid them for over 4 years in a cellar in a private farm. And then of course my uncle married her, and they didn't come to Israel, they went to Canada. And I just called my cousin in Canada. It's not my cousin, it's my mother's cousin. And I told him that I'm going to be here and I'm going to show. This is my uncle Kuba, and this is my uncle Chenek. Kuba is Yaakov, Chenek is Chaim, or I don't know, we called him Chenek. Yeah, Lieberman. My grandmother's name from the house was Goldberger, and you know, at that time they had many children, and when one husband died or a wife died, they would marry again. So at my grandmother's, there were my real siblings, my half siblings, and the siblings of the new father, but they were all the same, so there were about 12. But this lady who married my uncle, a Polish Christian girl, she was very young, she hid 12 Jews. But nobody made a movie about it, so nobody knows. But there were many people like that, don't forget it. In every place, you have good and you have bad. Is it okay that I'm standing? I'm just so excited that if I sit, When my mother was in the ghetto, this was before in school her best friend. So about a year and a half after the start of the war, her name was Krisha. She was a Christian Polish girl. And the parents of Krisha told my grandparents, we'll take Renia in. She looks Polish. She learned in a Polish school. She knows even the religious things of the Christian because she saw it in school. We'll take her in. And she lived with Krisha for 2 months. And 2 things happened. First of all, she missed her family and she wanted to go back to the ghetto. And secondly, you okay?
Yes,
No,
yes,
I don't.
okay.
I don't like to be with somebody with my back. And then they were told that the Nazis are killing Polish people who hide Jews. And my mother said to Krisha, I love you so much. I'll go back to the ghetto. I don't want the German to kill you and your family. And her father, because they were outside Krakow, brought her with the car just near the ghetto. She went on and she went back to the ghetto. So this is Krisha, and they talked like 70 years, something later, they found each other. But unfortunately, just a year before my mother came to Krakow, Krisha died. But about 3 months ago, a member of the family, I think she was her grand aunt, came to visit my mother. I have to see what we're looking. Okay. I just told the Austrian ambassador that they had an Oskar Schindler, an Austrian Oskar Schindler. I'm saying Oskar Schindler because everybody knows Oskar Schindler just because of the movie. Because before the movie was done in Hollywood, not many people knew about it. So Julius Madrich opened a textile factory, first outside Plaszow, and then he had to move it inside Plaszow because they saw that when it's outside Plaszow, so some Jews are running away on the way, so they told him to be inside. And this is my mother and this is my grandmother. They had to know how to sewing. And There were two ways to go into, these are other women, you can see them, how they're working. There were two ways to go to get into this factory. One, if you know to sew, and the other, if you still had enough money to buy a sewing machine. And my grandfather had a little money left. I mean, they took jewelries and so on, and bought 4 sewing machines. And so that's what saved their life. And my mother was too small. So the German officers went in and said, how do you have this little girl? Because she looked very small for her age too. So Julius Madrich was so smart. He said, there are some things that we do that we need little fingers. So we need a girl. And so he saved her, otherwise she would go. And so the Austrian, they did make a movie about Julius Madrich, but I think Julius and Raymond Titsch, who was his general manager, and there was another guy who was German, who was a policeman, who had to see who comes in and who comes out. And it's hard to say, not Julius Madrich and not Oskar Schindler came to Poland to save Jews. The only thing that happened to them is that they met Jews. You know, they were working with them, and suddenly they said, oh my God, Jews are like just any other people. Because I don't know, and I don't love the word, but the Nazis called the Jews Untermenschen. And I don't know how even to say it in English. Unter is under.
Subhuman.
Subhuman. They call them subhuman. Like they're not human, they're not animals, they're subhuman. And suddenly these guys, they work with people and they say, oh my God, what's subhumans? They're humans just like us. So they didn't come there to save Jews, but they worked with them, and then they decided to save them. And then they were making uniforms for the German army, and then and he opened another factory in Tarnów. He had one in Plaszow and one in Tarnów. He had like 2,000 Jews working for him, but then the German army said, we don't need these uniforms anymore, please close your factories. So he started to liquidate the factories, and he helped some Jews to escape. And then he met Oskar Schindler and told Oskar, maybe you can take some of my people to work at your factory, because Oskar Schindler had a munition factory. He was making bullets. And he said, yeah, I can take 100. And at that time, my mother was 15, and she saw my father only, she saw him, and she fell in love with him. But my father was 25, but she was still in love. She talked with him maybe 2 sentences. So there was a list made, not the Schindler list, the Madrich list of 100 people. And Edmund Titsch was standing outside and calling the names. And my mother still had her own little ring, and she made a little paper with the name of my father, and she went like this near Titsch and gave him the ring with the name. And after the 100, he called Ignaz Birnhack. My father's name is Isaac, Tzrak. In Polish it's Ignaz, and we call him Inek. And this story my mother didn't tell till my father died, because she said, I didn't want my children to know that I saved your father's life. It's not honorable for him that you'll think he married me just because he's grateful. And she kept the secret till the day he died, and then she told us how she saved his life and brought him to Oskar Schindler. So this is the Madrich, and I just gave paper to the Austrian. We have to do something about Julius Madrich and Edmund Titsch, because they were really great people and they helped so much. Yeah, so I know Austrian. I'm looking at you because you're Polish, so I'm
It's
confused.
all well connected.
Przepraszam,
No,
Pani
no,
ambasador.
no.
Ja się troszkę myliłem, ja się też
Absolutnie,
troszkę
nie.
czuję nie najlepiej tu.
Wszystko się tu łączy.
To
także-
wszystko, okay.
Dobra, to lewo start.
Okay, I'll speak quicker. Okay, yeah, I speak Polish because my grandparents didn't know Hebrew, so I spoke Polish. And the funny thing is, when they started the factory in Israel, they had all kinds of workers, Jewish and Arabs. And the Arabs learned Polish, and my grandparents didn't learn Hebrew. So they knew some words in Polish, and they were calling my grandmother Mamusha, which is mother, because everybody called her Mamusha, and they thought it's her name. So, yes. Okay, we'll go on. It's okay, I'm standing. It's yes. Yeah. Okay, here it's still in Julius Madrich factory. My mother, she was working on the machine that were making the holes for the buttons. And the needle went through her finger, so they brought her to the, I don't know, it's not a hospital, they had an inside clinic, and the doctor was Jewish, Dr. Fisher. She remembers the name, she told me just 3 days ago. And this was his wife, she was a nurse, Mrs. Fisher. And we got this picture from Madrich, and I think the German did it to show how human they are, that Jewish people are working but are taken care of very well. And my mother looked well, so this was like a propaganda picture to show how well they were treated, even working, okay? And this is the Schindler's List. And if you see number 20 is my father, Birnhack Ignacy, Yitzhak Birnhack. And number 21 is Wolfheiler Ignacy. My grandfather, we called in Israel Ignaz too. Ignaz Wolfheiler. Number 20 and 21. We did find that my mother, her sister, and my grandmother were like number 285 or something like that. But we didn't find in any, not in Google or anywhere, those other names. But as you see, number 20 and 21 are my grandfather and my father. Birnhack and Wolfheiler. And I think this is very good for me. As I told you, my mother fell in love with my father, and he had a little picture of himself, and he gave her the picture. And whenever there was, every morning, because people think, okay, they were at Oskar Schindler list, they were fine. No, they were not fine. They were fine while they were at the factory, but then they went back to Plaszow, and every morning there was a, how you call it? Not checkpoint, no, when you stand like in the army, in lines, and the Germans would go and look at somebody and say, no, this guy looks sick, and he's not good for work anymore. And my mother always said that she was standing like this and praying to God and saying, God, give me just another more day. Give me just one more day. And she had God. But my father said he lost God in the Holocaust. He said, God is a good God. So how can he allow things like this to happen? So I had a father who lost God, and I had a mother who loved God. And she said, God saved me. But I think she believed in it, and every day she was looking to the sky and saying, God, just another day, one more day, one more day. And this picture looks like this because when they made, sometimes they told the women to take everything off to see if they didn't have something in the pockets. So she took the picture and folded it and put it under her tongue. And, and she still has the picture, and therefore it looks like this because she holds it a lot of times. under the tongue. So that's love, my friends. Even in the worst time, it's love. And she even didn't have contact to him. She just fell in love the way he looks. And I think he was quite handsome. So I can understand her. Yes. Okay. And here you see them. That's when they got married in Israel. And that's just before they got married. As you see, my father is already in uniforms. Because when he came to Israel at 46, at 47, he joined what it's called the Haganah. And the Haganah fought for the Israeli Independence Day. He was in Chativat Karmeli. I don't know how to say Chativa in English.
Legion.
Not battalion.
Yes,
Yeah.
brigade.
No? Brigade, right, it's brigade. He was in the Carmel Brigade and he fought, and even he got an honor for being brave, because what was it for him to fight after the Holocaust? So yes, that's my father. And as you see, he's dark. And my mother was blonde. She had blue eyes, he had brown eyes, and I have green eyes because of that. And when they got married, they were all alone in Israel. Only one small cousin of my mother was took away during the war somehow and came to Israel. Okay, we'll see more. And if you don't recognize, that's me. And this is Oskar Schindler. And this is my aunt Halina. Halina was very beautiful, my mother too. Halina was a model. And my mother was this vice, how do you call it? Vice of the beauty queen of Israel. And all my family, they're very thin. Only my grandmother and me are not very thin. But I promise you, I was very, very thin when I was young.
You are eating what you are producing.
I don't, you know, that sometimes somebody in public relation told me, Liora, you don't say this. I hate sweets. I don't like sweet food. If you get, yesterday evening, you can ask her, they brought me a cake, and I said, I don't eat cakes. And I don't. I just eat good food, I suppose. I don't know. No, the truth is that when I was young, I started in Vienna to dance classic ballet with a Russian teacher who was hitting me in my legs with a stick. You know, she came from the Bolshoi. And that's how they taught ballet at the time. If you didn't hold your leg right, then you would get a stick. And then I came to Israel, and I was too advanced. They didn't have the good ballet, but I advanced. I passed all the Royal Academy of Dancing things. But then when I was 18 and a half, I went to the army, and I told the officer, you know, there is an officer who decides where you go. I told him, I'm a classic dancer, I need to continue to dance. Then he said to me, and the Israeli will understand it, you can dance hora in one, תרקדי hora באחד המחנות. Hora is the Israeli dance, okay? So I said, no, you're not serious, I'm a dancer. And he said, I don't care, dancing for another 2 years. And I stopped dancing, and I didn't do it again. 5 minutes. Okay, so this is Oskar Schindler. He visits a lot in Israel. He came every year. I don't know if you know, but the last years of his life, he didn't have a lot of money. And they say all kinds of things about Oskar, that he was a drinker, that he loved women, that he loved to party, and all these things. But because these things, he saved Jews. Because he brought alcohol to the Nazis. He made parties for the Nazis. He braved them. It was always, and even me as a girl, you see how Oskar speaks to me, because I was the only Israeli-born child. Oskar was calling 1,200 Jews, he was calling them my children. So he was always saying, Liora is my grandchildren. Oskar didn't have children. His wife Emilia, they divorced after the war, but we didn't have children. So he would call me, the Austrian are a little bit like the Polish, they say the words nicely. Anstatt Enkel, he called me mein Enkelchen. You know, it's like my granddaughter, but in a very nice way. So that's Oskar Schindler when I was about 11, and that's my mother. You see, she's beautiful. Why she was, and that's me. You see, what's it? And that's Oskar Schindler, and this is in Dan Carmel in Haifa. It's a known hotel in Haifa. This is in Dan Carmel, and every year, my grandmother, even she didn't have her own flat because all the money she had, she put in the factory, and she gave some. And this is my grandfather. You see, the officer. You see, you look at him. He looks like an officer of the Austro-Hungarian army. And that's my grandmother. And that's my mother. So Oskar was a part of my family. And as he called me his granddaughter, I didn't call him grandpa, because in my family we call, which is strange, but we call anyone by his name. Like I call my mother Renia, I was calling my father Ine, my children call me Liora, and I call him Oskar. So it's Oskar and me. Okay. You okay here? Yeah? But you don't see it.
I do. I have.
Ah, yeah? Oh, sorry,
We found the
okay.
solution there. We have a there.
Listen, I'm a general manager of a factory, so I'm always like, okay? And as you see, I'm very, I cannot sit, so you understand. Okay. And I'm 67 yesterday. This is my grandmother, my aunt, Oskar Schindler. Here is Oskar dancing with my grandmother. He came to all our celebrations. This one was the bar mitzvah of my cousin, the son of Helena. I had only 2 cousins, and I still have only 2 cousins, because from my father's side was nobody, and my mother had only 1 sister. So that's her son, and that's their daughter. That's my grandfather. This is Oskar. This is my uncle, and this, of course, my grandmother. And this is when Oskar met Helena somewhere in Europe, I think in France, when she was a model. So you see how beautiful she was, and like Oskar was happy to see her. And that's again. But he was at all our events till he died. And not only events, we took him, this is funny for you, but in Haifa, we live on a mountain. It's the Carmel mountain. So where I live, like 10 minutes away from me, there are 2 Druze, right to say, Druze cities, Usfia and Daliat el-Khair. And you take always tourists there. And Oskar, as he was always funny, always having fun, and therefore I loved him because it was such a great, so he put on a kafia. Say kafia here too? He put on a kafia, and that's my mother. You see, she's laughing because he did it like that. And this is Oskar. This lady I don't remember. This is my father, and this is me. This is my grandfather Oskar and my aunt, grandfather and Oskar. Whenever he came to Israel, we tried to take him to different places, and only northern Israelis who are not as young as our parliament members. There was a place in Naharia called Freddy Dura, and it was a restaurant, and people were playing there. There was music, so that's where we were. He always wanted to have fun. So that is Oskar Schindler. He always wanted good food, a good drink, and I'm like this too. So what can I say? Yeah, I can be very serious. I manage a factory in the past. Our ambassador Amir, when I'm angry, I shout at the biggest manufacturers in Israel, right? So it's always better to be my friend. Okay, really. And this is in Frankfurt. I'm not in the picture, but okay, I'll tell you in 1 minute. when my mother was at Oskar Schindler's, the soldiers in Plaszow, when they were bored, they did all kinds of things. So one day they were bored, and they took out all the women and told them just for fun to take heavy stones and איך אומרים קרש? אני רואה שאתה יודע. A board, like a board, a wooden board. So it's two women, and if you're not the taller one, then all the weight goes on you. So my mother fell with the face in the snow, and for 50 years she just said a soldier jumped at her back with his boots and walked up and down. And in the beginning she cried, and then she said, "I'll play dead." And she put her face in the snow, and it hurt her, but he broke her back. And then he said, and my grandmother was standing, and she knew if she'll go over there, she'll get shot. So she just stood there. And then the German said, "Oh, she's dead. Take her to there was I can't even say it, like the place you put the corpse." And my grandmother said, yeah, it's my daughter, I'll take her there. And they brought the blanket. And while my grandmother put the blanket, my mother whispered, "Mama, I'm not dead." So she said, "Shut up." And she took her and she hid her. They were in barracks under one bed. And nobody missed her because they thought she's dead. So nobody was looking for her. And she lay there for 5-6 weeks. And her back, well, young people, they heal quickly. But her back healed like not very good. But she was young, so she could still walk. But after she had my brother, they told her, "Don't have any other child anymore because your back is not going to bear it." So 6 years later, my brother said, she got pregnant. And she said to my mother, "I cannot be pregnant. They told me if I'm going to be pregnant, I'm going to be in a wheelchair." So my grandmother told her, "Enough Jews were killed. You're going to have the baby. I don't care. We'll deal with the baby, and then we'll deal with you." And that's what happened. And really, after she had me, the doctors in Israel said, "You have 1-2 years till you're on a wheelchair." So all the family saved money. They sent her first to Switzerland because they saw the best doctors are in Switzerland. The Swiss doctor said, "I can't help you." He sent her to a German doctor. The German doctor told her he heard about a very good specialist in Vienna, in Austria. And I was 3 years old, and she left me for 2 months because she was there. And then she came back and told my father I have to go for another 2 months. And he said, "Listen, Liora is 3 years old. You can't leave her for 2 months. I work, your parents work, her brother is 10 years old." So I was sleeping at my kindergarten, the one who was having the kindergarten. But it was okay because she was Polish and from Krakow, and she knew my family. But still, I was 3 years old, left alone by my mother. And my father said, "No way, we're going all to Austria for 1-2 years, and then we go back." So therefore, I was from the age of 3 till the age of 9.5 in Austria. And that's why I speak German. But as I spoke to the German and Austrian ambassadors, they say I speak more like German than Austrian, and only if you have a good ear, you can hear that it's Austrian. Okay?
Thank you.
I have a lot more to tell, as you know, but that's enough.
Liora, thank you. And of course, if any of our friends have any questions.
And feel free. You know me now, right? You can ask whatever you want.
But we gathered here, first of all, to understand that there is behind any survivor, there is a human story that we can hear and we can tell. And one of our targets is to remember it and to make sure that the next generations will know about it and will continue remember it and will continue talking about it and will continue do everything in order to make sure that it will never happen again.
And these 6 candles
And,
represent the 6 million.
I think that each and every one of us in our positions need to make sure that we do everything we can in order to stop racism, in order to
stop hatred.
to be tolerant, and this is why we are gathering here with our friends, and I'm sure that the values that I'm talking about now, we are sharing those values among our countries, among our people, and this is what we need to do in order to build a better world and a better future. And I know that here in the United Arab Emirates, under the leadership of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, they are not, as I said, they are not just talking; they are doing it. And I know that Her Excellency Noor Al-Kabi and His Excellency Ali Noemi are doing and investing a lot of their efforts and time and thoughts and activities in order to help building, we are here in the Middle East, better Middle East. And this is what's important for us. And now, again, if there are any questions,
I just have one sentence to
Please.
say. When I told my mother I'm coming to Abu Dhabi, she said, okay, I told you to talk, but your first talk is in a Muslim country. I don't believe it. So I told Amir, you have to take pictures of me, because she said, okay, we talked in many places, but the first time you're going to talk about the Holocaust is in a Muslim country. That's so exciting, that's so, I'll start to cry, because she for 1 week, she doesn't sleep, and she wanted to thank you so much. And you can ask a question. I never cried. As a child, I knew that I have to make my parents happy, because they called me my light. And even when bad things happened to me, I never told them. I was always smiling and dancing. Until today, I'm like that. And even if I'm very sad about something, when my mother calls me, I say, Ima, kol beseder.
كله تمام.
كله تمام.
كله تمام.
And about the languages, I know to write and read Arabic, but the schools in Israel.
Send us your CV later. We'll maybe
No, I'm just-
we'll hire you to the embassy.
Amir, you're jealous. Amir, you're jealous. I can feel it. No, I just want to tell you that it's stupid in Israel. They teach us to write and read, but they teach like literature Arabic. And when I went to the factory, which we had Jewish workers and Arab workers, I started to speak, and they said, stop. That's not the Arabic we talk. So what I intend to do this year is to learn what we call in Israel the spoken Arabic, Aravit מדוברת. But I know to write, I know to read. If it's without points, I make a little mistakes, but I don't understand what I read, so it doesn't matter. Yes. And really, feel free.
So if there is any questions or any insight that you would like to share with us, we will be very happy.
Can I ask you one question?
Yes.
But maybe not necessarily from an ambassadorial position, or not at all.
We're not ambassadors here. We're people.
Rather from a Polish citizen's position. Did ever your grandparents, parents, talk about the Krakow experience? That is, well, here kind of finding the right vocabulary in English, but
Say it to me in Polish and I'll translate.
did they ever think that the Krakow experience at all was an episode that allowed them to somehow push through? Because we know many books you've written on I know my relatively modern history, that the episode in Krakow and in Warsaw was a completely, almost two different planets.
No, the only difference that I know about, that Warsaw was all bombarded and they had to build Warsaw new. When you go to Warsaw, we landed in Warsaw, so there are all new buildings. And somehow, I don't know if the Americans or somebody, they didn't bombard Krakow, so Krakow is still like it was before the war.
Because you referred to this massive,
And,
Poland being a massive cemetery, and in a way it's very interesting because
That's what my father calls Poland, yes. That's what my father calls
I could imagine so, but you know, what I'm willing to ask, because as you rightly say, when you walk around Warsaw today, you cannot cross a single street or change a district not noticing a commemoration board or a place of Jewish, Polish martyrdom. Which in Krakow is not that often.
Yes.
Because, as you rightly said, Krakow, for some reason, by German
Okay,
Nazi,
because
was
they're from Krakow.
not decided to destroy the city. With the Warsaw Uprising and so on, the decision was taken to tear the city apart. 97% succeeded. But did they ever have a feeling, discussion with it about two different perspectives of Warsaw and Krakow? Was that at all?
You know, at that time, people didn't travel so much.
Yeah.
So, my mother was never in Warsaw when she was a girl.
Okay.
She knew only Krakow. But that was her mother town. That was where she lived, you know. So, and when she, you know, when we came back, because nothing was bombarded, she was walking like, oh, this is my house, and here was my neighbor, because it's the same. Although in her house now is a boutique hotel, but we have some more pictures. Okay, this is Julius Madrich in Israel, and this is me and my mother in Krakow, and as you see, here she stands with her sister, and we're standing at that same place. And look at her, she's smiling. My mother's at exactly the same place in Krakow, because nothing changed. And so we did this picture. You see, I'm standing on the side of my aunt, because my aunt died when she was 74. My mother is 96, and I hope she'll stay with us longer. So we did the same picture. And here, my mother is standing near her house in Gołębia. Gołębia.
Yeah.
Ulica Gołębia. Ulica
City
Gołębia.
center.
Yes, I think that's Gołębia, right?
Yeah.
Because
The
yeah.
doves, the street of the doves.
Doves, the doves,
The
yes, it's
the
doves.
dove keepers, yeah.
שעה רגע? אוקיי, את יכולה להמשיך רגע? Yeah. And then we went to Plaszów. Now Plaszów is now all green, just grass. The only thing that stayed is Amon Goeth's house. And my mother was telling me he was standing here, and I was standing with my mother near the house. And I was more excited than her. She suddenly got like, you know, and she said, Amon was standing here, and as I wrote, as amusement, he was shooting at Jews. And my mother said, I learned to run slalom. How do you say slalom? Slalom is what you do in ski when you go like that. She learned because even when you were in the Schindler's factory, you came back and you could be good shots, and you could be what they did to my mother, and that's picture we took. So that's answering some of your question. And Krakow is still in my mother's heart, but it's hard. Hard and hard. Okay?
Dr. Ali,
No.
First, Your Excellency, I'd like to thank you for inviting us to such great event, and it's an honor for me to have my guest here also. The Holocaust is not related only to Jews; it's to all human.
Yeah, we know.
And I urge all of you to read a new book that was released last year, "The Happiest Man on Earth,"
The happiest man on earth.
Yes. It's one of the
Yeah.
Holocaust survivors. And there is one thing that you mentioned. He said the same thing. You mentioned that your father, he used to know himself as Polish, not as Jews. The same thing. That survivor, in his book, he said, I was Jewish, but I was German. I felt that I am German. I belong to this country. I'm loyal to it. I lived with all my colleagues. I went to school with them. And suddenly, everything changed. And, here it's very important, the responsibility, to make sure that we counter the hate. It's not the responsibility of Israeli or Jews. It's all of us, and it's everywhere. And if I remember when I visited Israel, I went to that museum.
Yad Vashem.
Yes, yeah. And when I finished, that if anyone of you visited that museum, you will see that
Her Excellency Liora Birnhack was there as well.
it's in faces about the years and how at the end they reach all this tragedy. I told them, from what I see now, we are in 1933 because the hate crime is on the rise everywhere. And if people just keep monitoring and observing, we will end up having another tragedy somewhere.
Inshallah.
Yes, and this is where it's our responsibility to counter hate, regardless of the source of the hate or the targeted audience of the hate. And it should be based on prevention, not only to counter. And this is where we have to make sure that we immune the new generation from hate, and we promote the human values that we share together. And this is why I'm urging you to read this book, because he praised in his book the human values.
Your Excellency, it didn't happen overnight. It was built through many years of hateness, and propaganda and everything made to prepare the ground for what happened. And we, as I said, each and every one of us need to do his best to stop it. And when the world is getting into economical problems, the hateness is going up, and people are starting propaganda against other groups of people, and this is very dangerous. And we can see it in many countries today. And as far as we will be ready to look at it and to confront it and to do everything to stop it, we can stop the next, tragedy.
Can I say one thing?
Please.
I didn't say it before. I gave it. What I was told is that you don't have to be a bystander. You know what I mean? Because sometimes people are doing bad things and you don't interfere. And then
You don't
almost
you don't confront them.
you don't help those who are attacked.
Yeah.
You're a bystander. And I was told all the time, and Amir knows me, I'm fighting for all who I'm always fighting for the weaker ones, okay? Because I was told, don't be a bystander. If you're neutral, then you help the bad ones. You have to speak, you have to do, even if it's not very nice sometimes to do it, but you have to do it. And that's what I do. And I want to thank you so much for being here.
Hello, Your Excellency.
Please.
First of all, it's an honor to be here and welcome to Abu Dhabi. I know it's your first time. I'd like to extend our appreciation to you and to your mother especially for allowing you to be the voice. And I think this is a story that we always want to listen to. So I think that this is something that is very important for us, how to keep the story going. As His Excellency Mr. Ali mentioned, this is a story for all humanity. It's a story for us to not pastor said, there's always signs, and there was accumulation to what have occurred when the Holocaust happened. We were hoping that the pandemic was a challenge to bring all people together. Unfortunately, I think we have something that is worse than the pandemic itself. The hatred, the polarization that we see. And especially when it comes to even the future or the younger generations of hatred and racism. And our job is how can us as decision makers and civil servant, we need to be responsible, and we need to as well make sure that this is something that we do our best to block or to prevent from happening. Well, you're in the UAE, it's a home for everyone. I wish we can welcome your mother if it's possible. I don't know what it's.
If you send a private jet.
Yeah, maybe we can sort it out. But this is something that.
Sorry, I'm always joking, yeah.
It's okay, but yeah.
But what I
This
do
is
want
a
to tell
touching
you,
story. Thank you so
but
much.
what I do want to tell you is whenever you need me, even if it's for school children, it's only 3 hours away. And I'm just 67, I can't fly. So I am, and even the others, if you think I can contribute to something, I'm in your, how can I say? In your service. And I'm sorry if I say some things, mistakes. I'm no diplomat, I'm no politician. I make
Even
mistakes.
diplomats are
This
not
is why we love you
diplomats
for that.
anymore.
Yeah, but
we love
you.
Liora, we love you for that.
Yeah, but you said some things in Hebrew like "shut up." So.
No, we know what you said.
That's the real Liora, now you know the real Liora. And it's very hard to shut me up, but whenever you need me, I just take a plane.
Just say it.
Wherever you tell me,
Don't allow
in
anyone.
every
Don't
country
allow
you need
anyone to
me,
shut you up.
because it's my testimony now, I promised my mother to do it,
Yes.
and I'll do it with all my heart.
Yes, and I thank His Excellency for bringing you.
And I'm thanking His
Having-
Excellency for
having
thinking
us here,
about me.
And fact, of course, being here for the first time in your residency. Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you here, Sharaftuna. And I really think that it's important that we are sitting here, all of us, and talking about it. Your Excellency, my parents came from Iraq, and when they lived in Baghdad, they felt that they are Iraqis, and suddenly it was the Farhud, and then they left the country. So it happens, as you said, everywhere, and our target is to stop it. And the family of Ifat came from Europe, and maybe you'll have to say something about it.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you all for coming, and it's